Welcome to the second lesson of Introduction to Sewing. Today we're going to talk about seams. And as you can see, there are many different kinds of seams for many different purposes. Today we're going to learn about 4 seams that you will be using today. One of them you will use to adjust the length of this pillowcase. And then you will use several seams here to create this bag. There's different types of seams, and I want you to learn how to use them all and to be very familiar with them. All right, let's get started. The plain seam is basically when you put 2 pieces of fabric together, face to face, pretty face to pretty face, and you stitch them. Usually it's about 1/2 inch from the raw edge. A double stitched, which is this one, you have the pretty face to pretty face together, okay? Pretty face to pretty face together. And you do your 1/2 inch seam, and then you come back and you do a 1/4 inch. I'm guessing the only purpose for that is to reinforce it in case this one breaks, you have a safety net. On the front, that's what it looks like. All right, top stitch. Top stitch, you start off with the plain seam. And after you've done that, you take it to the ironing board and you push your seam to one side, and then you go over the top to give it a real pretty look on the outside. And on the back side, both pieces of raw edge are to one side. Then you have the double stitched seam, double top stitch seam. Again, you're gonna attach the 2 pieces of fabric together, but the back, you're gonna open one to one side, one to the other, and you iron it. Then you're going to do a top stitch on this side and on this side. This is not gonna make it any stronger because if you notice, that's still the only seam that's holding the fabrics together, but it looks pretty. So I guess that would be more of a decorative. And then we have the French seam. The French seam is usually used if you're going to do linens that you're going to wash a lot. Or in this case, on the inside of the bag, I wanted to use the French seam on the sides of the bag because I wanted to have a pretty edge on the inside. So both sides of the edge are the French seam. Now, how do you make a French seam? It's actually very simple. Normally, when you add 2 pieces of fabric together, when you sew them together, you put pretty face to pretty face, and you sew at 1/2 inch. With French seam is the other way around. You take the inside and you put it on top of the inside. So not pretty face to pretty face, but inside to inside, and you sew 1/4 inch. Then you turn pretty face to pretty face. Okay, you put pretty face to pretty face, and you sew 1/2 inch. By doing that, your first seam is encased in there. Can you see that? Your first seam is encased in there. And before you do this 1/2 inch seam, if you need to trim off any kind of stragglers or anything, go ahead and trim it off. If you need to iron it to make sure you got a sharp edge, go ahead and iron it. And then you do your 1/2 inch seam. We will make this pillowcase using that French seam. And then right here, in case you're wondering, it's just some decorative stitching that I did around the cuff of the pillowcase just because I wanted to test out my machine. I have to tell you something. Do you see these things? You know what that is? I cleaned and oiled my machine, and I did run a few scraps through it to make sure there's no oil coming out. But guess what? Yeah. So I'm going to leave it just like this because live and learn, right? So that was plain seam, top stitch seam, and French seam. There is such thing as mock French seam, and I'm going to tell you how that works. I don't have an example. You do pretty face to pretty face, and you do it at 1/2 inch from the raw edge. Then you fold in both sides of your seam, and it looks, and you sew over that, okay? It looks like this. So both raw edges are encased inside, but you have an extra seam right here to hold those edges inside. Your iron is going to be your best friend for your mock French seam. I can't talk. All right, flat felled seam. This is probably the strongest there is, and they use it for denim. For if you look at your jeans, probably along the leg, you'll see that some men's shirt around the shoulder, the armhole and the shoulder, you'll see that. That's what it looks like on the back, and that's what it looks like on the front. There are 3 ways of doing it. I'm going to tell you probably the simplest way. I don't know. For the bag, we use this one on the bottom. Can you see that? On the bottom, because it's the strongest seam and I want it to be the strongest on the bag. All right, so the way you do it, you do the inside of the fabric, the wrong side, facing each other, and you sew a seam of about 5/8 off the raw edge. Make sure you secure both beginning and end of your seam, okay? Then on one side of the seam allowances, you're going to trim off 1/4 inch. So when you're looking at your seam, let's take this one for example. Okay, ignore that second line. Here, both this and this are equal, okay? Whereas on a flat felled seam, one would be narrower. And the reason you want to do that is because you're going to take the long one and flip it over and iron it. I don't know if you can see. Okay, so you take the larger seam allowance and you flip it over the narrow seam allowance and you iron it. Then you tuck it under and then you sew over the top. And that's how you create a flat felled seam. All right, so now let's make a bag. My bag, I decided to make it 16 by 16. And to that, I gave it about an inch for the French seam allowance on the sides and an inch here. So 16 plus 1 plus 1. At the bottom, I wanted to give it 2 inches. So it's 16 high plus 2. And the top, I want it to be 3 inches. So plus 3. Oh, let's say 4, just to be safe. So it's 16 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1. And 16 plus 3 plus 4. It's better to have more because you can always cut it off if you don't want it, but you don't want to have to cut off a new piece because you cut it too small. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to sew a flat felled seam on the bottom. Then you're going to sew French seams on both sides. Then you're going to set this guy aside, okay? You're going to take your handle pieces, which is these guys, and in my case, I made them 24 inches long, but you make them however long you want. And you turn them pretty face to pretty face. Okay, and you fold them in half. You can make them however wide you want. In my case, I made them 2 inches wide, so they're going to be 4 inches. Hang on a sec. Sorry. I'm coming back. All right. So you see how it's 2.5, because when you unfold it, you cut it a 5 inch, and when you fold it down, it's going to be 2.5. You're going to sew it at 2 inches. So you're going to sew it right there. That's going to leave you with an exactly 2 inch wide finished product. And there's 2 ways of doing this. And I'm going to show you one way. Well, okay, one way is to double reinforce stitching here, go all the way down, reinforce, and then turn it inside out. The other option is close this end, come all the way down, stop about here, reinforce it, jump to here, reinforce it, come to this end and close this end. Then through this hole that you left open, pull that guy inside out and pull this guy inside out. Iron it, and then you have to top stitch it, otherwise you're going to have this hole here. So now you're going to have to go all the way around, which in my case worked out great because I used that as decorative. You see? I don't even know where my hole was that I left it open. That's where it was. But I stitched over it and we're good to go. The reason you want to do these before you do the top hemming of your bag is because you're going to catch this in the hem. So now you are going to measure your 3 inches and then another, I don't know, 1/4 inch that you're going to tuck under because you don't want a raw edge here. So let's do 3.5 inches, right? You tuck that under, you iron it, then you iron this. Then you're going to pin your handles in place. Now, as you can see, this one, I did as I told you, that I closed my ends. This one I did not. Instead, I finished with a zigzag, and look, it's still unraveling. So I don't really like this. I like this better. But this is harder to go with your machine over it because it's bulkier. Anyway, something I want to tell you. Here we go. Do you see how this one folds nicely? And do you see how this one is twisted? Yeah. So pay close attention. Don't do like I did. But I'm going to leave mine just like this because it's good learning. Make sure that you measure from the center equal distance and that the first one and the second one are exactly on top of each other. And then you're going to pin them in place. 1, 2, 3, 4. I would do 2, 3 pins, like put one here, and maybe one in the middle. One here, one here, one in the middle. And then you're going to go around the top, all the way around the bag, and around the bottom, all the way around the bag. And there's your bag. Now let's talk about the pocket. The pocket is basically just a square of whatever desired size you want to have. And what I would do, if it were me, I would hem the bottom at about 1/4 inch and iron it. Excuse me, fold the bottom and iron it, not hem it. Fold the sides at 1/4 inch and iron it. And then fold the top 1/4 inch and iron it. But then after that, you fold the top another inch or 2. So now you're going to have a pretty edge on the inside of your pocket right there. You see that? Not a raw edge. If you don't have enough material and you want to zigzag it or finish that stitch, that edge somehow, that's fine too. Or you can get creative with this. I mean, pretty much anything. But once all your sides are folded and ironed, then you apply it to your bag, pin it in place, and sew it. Make sure you reinforce it. Come all the way down, come all the way down, come all the way down, reinforce it. If you want to make a little place for your pencil or a bigger one for your glasses, take some painter's tape and put it right here and sew along that line. That way you didn't draw on your pocket, but you have a perfectly straight line because you use that painter's tape to guide you. That's just something, you know, if you want to do it, or do half and half pocket. Whatever you want to do, this is yours to do. One last thing, in my bag, so your bag is finished at that point. However, if you want to do boxed corners, so my bag, I want it to be 3D, so to speak. The way you do that, you measure 2 inches and 2 inches, like that. And same thing here, 2 inches and 2 inches, and you cut it out. And then you turn it in on a diagonal, and you sew those two together. Let me turn the bag inside out to show you what it looks like. All right, that's what it looks like. And if you can see, my side seam matches with my bottom seam. Can you see that? They're right on top of each other. And you just sew right over the top. Now, because you've cut that square, you're going to have raw edges here, and this is going to come undone. This is where you do your mock French seam. You have those 2 raw edges, and you turn them in, and you bottom one, you turn it in, you iron it, and then you're going to do a stitch over the top of it. Mine is not very pretty, but guess what? It's inside of the bag. It's not unraveling. I can wash this bag 100 times, and it's not going to come undone. Here's the other side, and you can see how I folded them in. So I first did my stitch to create the box corner, and then I folded my raw edges in, and I did my second stitch, always reinforcing the ends, and I need to cut that little tail off. Yep. All right, so this was our lesson for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.